Hello and welcome to Church Online. We love that you've chosen to join with us today to worship together and also to continue in the incredible teaching of the Jesus Way series. We're about to launch into worship, but before we do, it says in Matthew 11, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I don't know where you find yourself today, but I know as we rest in God's presence, as we worship Him, He will renew our soul, He will renew our strength. So wherever you are today, stand up, get ready, and let's worship Him today.
on, church, let's just come before God now and recognize that He is sovereign and that He has His hand over every single area of our lives. The world may fade away, but you are here to stay. You are the great I am, the beginning and the end, the calm of every storm, the light of every dawn. You always make a way, and forever you will reign. You're over it all. You're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You're over it all. God, you're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You're over it all. The highest authority. Your word brings clarity. Your power rushes in, and you're moving once again. God, you're breaking every chain, and you're taking all the pain. There's nothing you can do, and there's no one else like you. You're over it all. You're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You're over it all. God, you're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You are my defender, my savior for all times. You are my redeemer, forever on my side. You are my provider, my healer for all time. And you remain the same, and this will never change, God. God, you never change, Lord. Through it all, you are constant, you are here. And you're faithful, God. You're faithful, Lord. Through it all, God. And you're over it all. You're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You're over it all. God, you're over it all. You're over it all. Jesus, you are Lord. You are my defender, my savior for all time. You are my redeemer, forever on my side. You are my provider, my healer for all time. And you remain the same, and this will never change. You are my defender, my savior for all time. You are my redeemer, forever on my side. You are my provider, my healer for all time. And you remain the same, and this will never change. And you remain the same, God, this will never change. You're over it all.
This week I've been talking to our children about that well-known Bible verse in Philippians 4 verse 13 that tells us we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. And this is one of those verses that we know and we can often roll off the tongue, but how often do we actually take a moment to just think about the truth and the power behind that scripture? Let me read to you the verse before that, where Paul writes this: I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Goes on to say that verse, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. And I just wanted to remind you of this truth today, because I don't know what you're facing at the moment. I don't know what maybe fear or insecurity or addiction you're facing, or maybe you're in lack in some way. You need God to provide, finances or a job or just guidance to show you the way forward. I just want you to take courage and be encouraged by these verses today that's saying, I have learned to be content in any situation because I can do all this through him who gives me strength. You remember, the key to whatever you're going through at the moment is not to do it in your own strength, but to do it through Christ, to do it in his strength. Whatever it is that we're going through, we can overcome because he first overcame. We can do it in his strength. So whatever it is you're facing today, I want to encourage you just to spend a moment right now. Maybe even right now, would you close your eyes? Would you put your hands out and to surrender to God and just say, God, I give you this situation. I'm doing it in your strength and not my own. Let's pray. God, I just pray right now for each and every one of us. God, we thank you for this scripture, this truth that tells us that we can do anything through your strength. So God, I pray that for us today, that whatever it is running through our minds right now, God, I pray that you will be at work in that situation. And as that we go through you, as we give it to you, God, that you will show us the way forward, that you will bring breakthrough in our situation. And God, that we will just be able to experience that contentness that Paul speaks about, because we know we're doing all things in your strength. So God, just come and be with us today. Show us the way forward. Let your will be done. Amen.
Welcome, this is Church News. Over the next couple of moments, we're going to give you just information and dates of everything that's happening here at Influence Church. Enjoy yourself. Coming up in a few moments, we have got the Jesus Way. We are loving this teaching series so much as we delve into what Jesus did more than what he said. So why don't you get your Bibles, your pads and pens ready for another incredible preach.
This Tuesday is the 1st of June, which means it's time once again for our day of prayer. We love as a church uniting in prayer together across all locations online on the first Tuesday of every month. So we'd love you to join us. If you joined us last month, then the Zoom links that you were sent are still active. You don't need to reapply. But if you've yet to join us for a day of prayer, you want to head over to the website influencechurch.co.uk/events. Register for the day of prayer so we can send you the Zoom links. And then on the day on Tuesday, we've got prayer options at 6:30 a.m, 12 p.m, and 8 p.m. Prayer is powerful. Prayer is something that's a priority for us as a church, and we would love you to join us this Tuesday for our day of prayer.
Elevate, I'm talking to you guys right now. This coming Thursday, we are live, yes live, in person. We have an encounter night in our Richmond campus, 7 p.m. to 8:30. No need to book tickets, just let us know if you come in on our Instagram, and then we look forward to seeing you there.
Every single week, we have an incredible opportunity to give into the life of what God is doing through Influence Church financially. And you can give today by heading over to our website and heading to influencechurch.co.uk/giving, or follow one of the links below. It is a joy to give, and it is a joy to see what God is doing through church.
Well, that's everything for Church News this week. If you need a recap or reminder, make sure you follow us on our social media pages or visit the website. And yeah, we hope you have a brilliant week. And if you're watching online and you're local, why not join us in person next week? But whatever you do, have a great week. Bye, church.
everyone. Welcome to Influence Church. Thank you for joining us online today. We're privileged to have you from wherever you are watching from. I'm Ed. I am our campus pastor in Penrith, and I am looking forward to bringing a word today from our new series, which is called The Jesus Way. Hopefully you've been enjoying this series. If you have, by all means, comment in the chat, or if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, and we would love to hear what you're getting out of this. I'm just going to start by reading a Bible verse, or a few verses from the Bible, because who knows, it's always a good place to start. And in Matthew 9, verse 35 to 38, it says, Jesus went through all the towns and the villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. This is good news, eh? When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." And that alone is a great quote. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. It instantly makes you think that God is doing so much, and that he is looking for people to say, I want to play a part on that mission. And this whole passage of scripture comes right at the end of Matthew chapter 9, and there's two chapters, chapter 8 and 9, which are off the back of Jesus preaching on the Sermon on the Mount. And then we go into these two chapters, 8 and 9, where Jesus is basically just reaching out to people. And what I love about it is it's largely random interactions with people. They weren't planned, they weren't the places Jesus was heading, but he was interrupted by people. People came across his path, people asked him for help. And I love how we see his response to that, and we're going to read some of that in a bit. But I was kind of, this whole thing that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And looking at the life of Jesus and how he modeled life, it kind of made me think that for many of us, life is governed by several different things. For some people, it's money. For some people, it's opportunity. You know, if only I had an opportunity, then I could do something great for God. But I want to say that above money, above opportunity, is availability. And this is what I want to talk about tonight, the idea of being available for God. Because if you think of availability, you kind of think of the fact that we're all busy people and we've got booked up diaries and there's things happening, and we schedule life by the time that we kind of don't have, if you know what I mean. And we look at parties and stuff like that we'd maybe like to go to, but we just haven't got the availability. And sometimes we're glad we haven't got availability. There's nothing like the safety net of a full diary to say, oh, I'd love to come and help you, but I can't. But what I kind of struggle with in that way of life is it doesn't leave any room. You know, a full diary does not leave any room for randomness. It doesn't leave any room for sporadic. It doesn't leave any room for, this is a great word, serendipity, which is to discover something on accident, far greater than you could ever have planned. It doesn't leave any room for accidental happenings, interruptions, because we're so busy, we're so focused, we've got in front of us what we need to do, we get on with it, we go through life, we schedule things, but there's no availability for God to do anything that is outside the sphere of our organized control. And I've learned as a person, I thrive in random situations. I love those situations where you get kind of stuck talking to someone you had no plan of talking to. You know, those times where there's someone in the street trying to sell you something, for whatever reason, perhaps because you're a nice guy, you get stuck with them. and you're too nice to say I'm not interested, and you end up giving an email address, usually of a friend. But there's those random interactions with people, and I've realised as a person I thrive on this. I think that was one of the reasons I've loved doing youth ministry for so long, is as much as it's the event that we had planned, what really made it for me was the young people coming in and the interactions I'd have with them that weren't in the schedule, that weren't planned, that I didn't have a say in, but someone would come up and just share what was going on in their life. Someone would come and say what they were struggling with. Someone would come and open up, and you walk away thinking that was the best part of the night. The best part of the night wasn't the bit that I planned. The best part of the night was the random thing, and you know, of course, there's those funny random encounters that we have as well. I remember the first time I went to Australia, I had 15 hours in China, and I was slightly nervous I was going to have to spend them all in an airport, but they actually let us out and about and put us up in a hotel, and I spent these 15 random hours with 3 blokes that I'd never met, didn't know, have never seen again. And we just had this special time together, discovering a random culture that we'd never seen, and going into markets and seeing, you know, them selling live toads and whatever else, and going to what we thought was a coffee shop, and they presented us with cats to stroke, and there was all sorts of random things that happened that if I'd have just stuck to my schedule and to the diary of what I thought was going to happen, I'd have missed out on all of that. And I love that Jesus, perhaps not that example, but models a way of life that has availability for God to throw stuff your way, has availability for someone to interrupt you, has availability for someone to come across his path that he didn't plan for, that it wasn't in his diary that day, but he allowed time and was available for it to happen. And you know, I love that the very reason God sent Jesus to earth was to demonstrate his availability for us to be in relationship with him, for us to understand his love, his grace, his mercy. We have a God who is available for us. And I think of the many people that Jesus encountered on the street, the many people that just so happen to now find their story in the pages of history through the Bible, that you know, they were just random people going around on random days, probably popped home after and said, "You'd never guess who I just met," and talk about how it just changed their life. And I kind of think of some of these people. You think of the thief on the cross who just happens to be rotated on to be next to Jesus. So as he dies, you kind of think it wasn't in Jesus's diary for them two to be together, but it just happened that God had just orchestrated it, that they were going to be together and be next to each other on the cross. And the thief at the time, you know, just reaches out, and there's something of Jesus' availability just to speak into his life, to speak into his situation, to understand that there's something going on in this guy's heart. Jesus was open for that. And, you know, I think of Bartimaeus who was begging like he always did. Perhaps in Bishop Auckland, we'd say he was hustling for a few quid. And he did this every day, and the day that he happens to bump into Jesus, he wasn't looking for a miracle. He was just doing what he always did, but sporadically, you know, there's this moment where Jesus comes and he's able to heal him of his blindness. Just an accidental, a random time, but Jesus was available for Bartimaeus. You think of the man with the withered hand who was going about his life, going to the temple like he probably did every day of his life, not particularly thinking that his hand could be healed, but one day he bumps into Jesus, and Jesus is available to do something in his situation. You think of the 10 lepers. You think of the woman at the well who meets this guy who tells her everything that she's ever done. You think of the cripple at the pool of Bethesda who'd been there 38 years and had kind of talked himself out of any possibility of anything ever changing in his life until a sporadic, random encounter with Jesus, where Jesus is available for him to do something about his situation. And these events largely not planned, these events largely not where Jesus was going. They weren't the final destination. He was often passing through. He'd often go to see one person and end up seeing 10 more. But he was available for God to add surprises, random encounters that would ultimately lead to countless lives changed. And this gets me excited to think, who is there in our world who is perhaps going around their daily life, perhaps believing that this is the way things will always be, perhaps not even thinking that anything could ever change in their life. But really, there's going to be something that happens if we as people will just switch our status to I am available, to begin to look out for people, to be able to get into people's lives, to be able to, be challenged to speak to the people who we live near, to be open with them, to have that availability just to listen to people. It gets me excited to think what could happen if we were willing and open for randomness, if we were willing and open for sporadic moments of God-led inspiration, if we were just willing to say, God, I'm available to be used by you today. But so often we're just so limited by our diary, our schedule, our way of doing things. And I just want to pull out, as I referenced right at the start, some of the scriptures in Matthew 8 and 9, which just show Jesus' availability to these people. And in Matthew 8 and Matthew 9, there is so much happening. Basically, everything is happening. But in Matthew 8, just as he comes down from preaching what we call the Sermon on the Mount, in verse 1, it says, when Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. So there's loads of people there. It says, a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And this is interesting alone because this man had leprosy. What that meant in that time and that culture was he wouldn't have been part of that large crowd. He'd have been on the outskirts. Yet he realizes Jesus is around and decides to push his way through the crowd to be near Jesus. This was kind of counterculture alone, but what happens next it even goes against the grain even more, because it says Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. Now that definitely wouldn't happen in that time and culture. But Jesus says to him, I am willing. He said, be clean. And immediately the man was cleansed of his leprosy. Jesus has preached. He's no doubt in a human aspect, he'd be tired. He's got a large crowd of people to deal with. He's on his way somewhere else. Yet this man seeks him out, and instantly he's available to do something about this man's situation. And I think that alone is incredible. That alone is a great example. But what we see happening time and time again, because I haven't got the time to read this all from the Bible, but I'm going to paraphrase it, and you can read this in Matthew 8 and Matthew 9. But he then leaves that place, and as he enters the town called Capernaum, a centurion then asks him if he could heal his servant. And Jesus even offers and says, look, I'm available to go and see your servant. And the centurion then says something which, if you've been in church for any time, you'll have heard us say. He says, no, there's no need for you to come. You carry the authority. If you just say the word, it will be done. And so it was. This guy is healed. And then he's at Peter's house, and Peter's mother-in-law is not well. And she, it doesn't say exactly what's up with her, but she's not good. And Jesus heals her. And then the poor woman, who's obviously just recovered from being ill, then has a house full of people who are demon possessed and going through problems. And it says Jesus healed everyone that was there. And then he's on a boat and he's calming a storm. And then he arrives on the other side of the lake, and there's two men there who are demon possessed, and he heals them. And then he heads back to the other side of the lake. He's met with a paralyzed man. He says to him, get up, take your mat and walk, and gets in a little bit of trouble with the Pharisees for saying that. And then after he'd left there, he then sees a tax collector called Matthew, and he says to him, come and follow me. And he does, and gets in a little bit more trouble for that. And then we see him teaching. And he's talking about the old wineskins and the new wineskins. And then we're going to read this interruption that happens in Matthew 9, verse 18 to 26. He says, whilst he was saying this, whilst he was teaching, synagogue leader came and knelt before him and said, "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live." Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. So you think he's already available there. But just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If only I can touch his cloak, I will be healed." Jesus turned to her and saw her. "Take heart, daughter," he said, "your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, "Go away. The girl is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. And the crowd had been put outside. He went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread throughout the region. We've got like a miracle within a miracle. And what starts with Jesus preaching ends up with a woman interrupting his interruption and getting healed. And we see a girl raised from the dead, all because of his availability, not to do his will, but to do God's will. His availability to be used by God, to see anyone. And that, you know, this alone is incredible. But then we read on in Matthew 9:27, bearing in mind we just read 26. It says, as Jesus went out from there, so as he left that place, as he raised that girl back to life, he says, 2 blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." And so it's like go from one place, and it says in the Bible, as Jesus went out of there, he's pursued by these 2 men. He's got availability in him to heal them. And then I love that after his encounter with them in Matthew 9:32, it says, while they were going out, so just as these men are then leaving, it says, a man was brought in demon-possessed and could not talk, was brought to Jesus, and Jesus heals him. This is like the busiest mobile doctor surgery that you've ever seen. I don't know what Jesus' schedule was like for these days. I don't know if his disciples had something planned, but he was totally available for people. And you think maybe outside of Peter's mother-in-law, there was no relationship with any of these people. These people were strangers, yet he was open and available. And for whoever, for interruptions. And this just got me thinking, are we ready? Are we prepared for the whilst I was going moments? The when they were leaving moments? Are you okay with the whilst I was speaking moments? Are you okay with God interrupting you? Are you okay with God giving you opportunities that you'd have never dreamt of, audiences you'd have never sought after, just for him to be able to do a moment for you, to have humanity with someone, to love someone, to have compassion with someone, ultimately maybe to see them come into a relationship with him? Have you got time in your schedule for them? Because as Jesus says, the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And we can take these 4 simple points away from Jesus' interaction with people, and these are all, I say simple, and they are simple. The first one is this: he had time for people. Okay, so I told you these are basic, these aren't going to shock you. But if we can actually, instead of just think that's basic, and actually think, if I put that into my life, perhaps that could be totally transformational for where I live. He says, you know, as much as he had time for people, as much as he was available, as much as he was going from place to place, he was available for whatever came his way, whoever came his way. Yeah, you know, and I think the challenge for us is as people who live life with such tight schedules, and people who live life largely on our terms, but want God to bless our plans. I love what Jesus did, which was simply, God, whatever you want to do, God, I want to be used by you. And I love that these random interruptions we're still reading today, because Jesus had time and was available to do something, to help someone and change their situation. The second thing is he loved people. And I just want to add to that, he loved people, even strangers. What I take, I guess, note from Jesus's love was that it was a love, so firstly for people he didn't know, but secondly that none of the people who he healed, who came to him, could give him anything. This wasn't like doing a friend a favor, you know, if you come and preach at my church and I'll heal your daughter or something. None of these people could give him anything. None of these people largely he had any relationship with, yet he loved them just as God loved us. He demonstrated God's love to every single one of them. The third thing is this: he listened to people. He let them speak. He said, what's going on? What's up? What do you need? He was interested in what they were going through. And I think sometimes we can be, we can sound interested, but really we're not, because we're so busy. We just want to get on with it. We perhaps just want to give people a solution. Hey, have you tried doing this? Have you tried doing that? All good. Where Jesus was actually available to say, what is going on? What do you need? How can I help? And then my final point is this. And this is a good word. This is a word that we don't use very often. And it's this: he gave them an impartation. And this sort of word that does sound excellent in a South African accent, actually. But whoever Jesus met, they left with something that he carried in him. He imparted into them God's presence. They often left with something that was far bigger than their situation. They left with a solution that was greater than just needing a healing. They encountered the presence of God. Jesus was an available vessel who gave people what God had given him. He passed it on. And we are carriers of God's presence wherever we go. And the choice for us isn't to hide our light, but to actually let our light shine so as other people can see our good deeds and begin to praise God. So as people can look at how we are available to help them, to listen to them, to be kind to them, to show them God's love, and begin to see God through us. If we can just be available to impart God's presence into people, it will be transformational. But it comes with us willing to say, God, this isn't about me doing things my way. This is about me being totally and utterly available for you to use me how you need to. I was thinking of some random encounters that I've personally had and random encounters that I've heard. But one of the ones I had was several years ago, me and a friend from church had gone to a local town, and we'd somehow were given the task of meeting a lady there to give her food, to give her toiletries, I think to give her some bedding. And we'd agreed to meet her at the town clock at 7 o'clock. And it got to like 10 past, it got to 20 past. There was no sign of her. And you know, we're busy people. You think, right, that was it. She didn't turn up. What a shame. Get on with our lives. But we really felt that God had put us there that night, and we decided that we'd just continue walking to move on. And I remember we were kind of going under an underpass, and there was people who weren't in the underpass. They were walking across the top of the pavement. So we were like that, and they were like that. And just at that moment, for whatever reason, our eyes met, and we just, I don't know who spoke first, but we reached out to these people, and in the most like kind of random way, and it ended up realizing that these people had issues with drugs, and was kind of stuck in this cycle. And we took them to the entrance of a shop. It was Marks and Spencer's, and it was at night, and it was dark, and we just prayed with them. We shared the gospel of Jesus with them. We went over to McDonald's. We gave them some food. We gave them all the stuff that we were going to give this lady who never turned up. We realized they were the people that God had given us that night to bless. And as we prayed with them and spent that time with them, the fruit of that was incredible. That there was a guy who then would come through to church, and would come regularly, came to men's conference with us. His name was Frankie, and he ended up being baptized in this church, Influence Church, and then he went to a Christian rehab, and then very sadly, in a moment of weakness, ended up dying of a heroin overdose. But what I love is to think that I will see Frankie again, to know that he is in heaven, to know that he's saved, to know that because of my availability, simply not to give up and think, well, this girl hasn't turned up, that we had this most random encounter with someone that transform their eternity. And there's many encounters like that perhaps you've had, like perhaps I've had in the past. And the challenge for us isn't that these would just be stories of the past, but the challenge is that we'd be open and available today to actually say, God, will you come and use me afresh today? You know, my prayer is that God would send me more people like Frankie's. My frustration is that life gets on top of us and life gets busy, and actually there needs to be something in us that pushes through that and says, I am available to be used by you. You know, there's an incredible evangelist called Reinhard Bonnke who is with the Lord now, but had this incredible global ministry, mainly in Africa, but who's credited with seeing 77 million people come to know Jesus. That is some figure, but I remember hearing him say that he felt so clearly that God spoke to him and said, you know, Reinhard, you weren't the first person I asked. You weren't even the second person I asked, but you were the first available person. You were the person who said yes. You're the person who said, I will go. And, you know, I think of David Wilkerson, who was this skinny preacher from the hills of Pennsylvania who was sat at home one night reading a newspaper and learning about some young lads who were on trial for murder in New York, and something within him felt he needed to be available for them. And so he went to New York to see them, and never actually got to see them, but in the process began to reach thousands and hundreds and thousands of young people, and started seeing gang members come to know the Lord, and then started this ministry called Teen Challenge, which even people within the life of our church have benefited from. Just available, ordinary people. I think of a plumber from Bradford called Smith Wigglesworth, who couldn't read or write, had a little bit of a bad temper, but saw countless healings and as many as 14 people raised from the dead. Extraordinary things happen when we say yes, when we mark our status as available. Perhaps today you need to realign some plans in your life. Perhaps today you need to look hard at what is priority and what should be priority. Perhaps you need to look at the things where you know that God has called you for this. You know, like me, you perhaps have a heart for broken people and lost people, but there are so many things that distract and get in the way of you living out that calling. Perhaps today is a time to reassess, to realign. Perhaps today you need to understand that God is available for you. Like I said earlier, that Jesus came to earth to highlight for us God is available for you. And if today you want to maybe start that relationship with Jesus, come into relationship with him, you can do that just where you are right now. But you can also fill out one of our forms online if you head over to influencechurch.co.uk/response. If you want to respond today, then you can fill out a form. We'd love to contact you. We'd love to pray with you. It will be one of the best decisions, if not the greatest decision you will ever make in your life, to come into a personal relationship with Jesus. But just as we leave, just as we move back into this time of worship today, I just really hope that today there's been some stirring that's happened within you, as it has with me, as I've been preparing this message of just, actually, I don't just want to go around life on my terms. Actually, I've been put here to make a difference for God's kingdom. I've been put here for God to use me with all my imperfections, but to reach people. And sooner or later, if things start to hinder that, then I need to move some things around and choose to say today, God, I want to be available for you.
You hung the stars, you moved the sea, Creator God, the majesty on earth. It's just a glimpse of who you are. And you are the God of miracles. I see the evidence displayed in every painted sky. Your beauty shines. And I know nothing is too hard for you, and nothing stands against your truth. You have spoken, I will trust, and I will fix my eyes on what you've done. You've already overcome, so forever this my song. And I know you are high above it all, and you are always in control. I'm confident, and I know that you are high above it all, and you will always be enough. God is who you are. The wind and waves, they wait to hear a whisper from the great I am. Yet still you want my heart, call me friend. And I know nothing is too hard for you, and nothing stands against your truth. You have spoken, I will trust, and I will fix my eyes on what you've done. You've already overcome, so forever this my song. And I know that you are high above it all, and you are always in control. I'm confident, and I know that you are high above it all, and you will always be enough. God, it's who you are. It's who you are, God. You awake our faith, you awake our hearts, and you open our eyes to believe again. All praise I give to the waker of my dreams, to the one who calls my heart to believe again.
Thanks so much for joining us today. What an incredible message that was, and how powerful it is to spend time in the presence of God together. When we exalt Jesus in our worship, something starts to shift in our lives. I want to encourage you that worship doesn't have to just remain here as part of an online service, but you can unlock the power of praise in your daily lives. If you want more information on how to do that, you don't know how to access that music or anything else, then feel free to message us. But you can find it through our YouTube page, you can find it through our Facebook. You can always access these services again. And let's make sure that we're people who access the presence of God through the power of our praise and worship. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope that the word encouraged you today from our series, The Jesus Way. We're going to be continuing that again next week, and we would love to see you, whether it's here on Church Online, but don't forget our physical locations are open in all towns: Richmond, Barnard Castle, Penrith, and Bishop Auckland. We'd love to see you in church. If you've not yet returned back to church, I want to encourage you to come. It's a safe and welcoming environment. It's a place where you can come and worship alongside other people, socially distant, of course, but there's something significant about when we worship together. God bless you guys. Thank you for joining us today. If you want any more information, find us on our website or our social media. We'd love to connect with you there. Have a brilliant and a blessed week.